I'm so glad that you're here. Tall tales, short stories, dusty film cans. We're going to dive into the journey. We're going to rewind the film journey. And we're going to talk about soundtracks today. We are going to look at some very interesting and unique takes from a cultural perspective that I've always been very interested in. I've wanted to talk about these, and I have talked about them, quite frankly, to friends. Music we listen to, things we enjoy. And I can honestly tell you that whenever I watch, let's say the Oscars is a prime example, and the best soundtrack comes up, this has been a thorn in my side for years. Because if it is a ranking of what is the best out there, nothing we're going to talk about today has ever made the best soundtrack list that I am aware of. I stopped watching award shows years ago. I feel like it's a peer-to-peer acknowledgement. I always get the feeling that I'm looking at people like they're in a snow globe, studying them outside of the way that they would entertain me normally. So I've never been really comfortable with award shows because I think that's their time to say congratulations to each other. But when I did watch them, when I was involved in watching others give flowers to each other, I would almost disagree every time, every pick, most categories. They just didn't resonate with what I was viewing, the experience I was having. Um, so we're going to do a powerhouse edition, and we're going to dive into so many different ways that we can explore films across a span of time that touch on things that resonate with viewers that never ever get any shine. But I wanted to start with soundtracks because, first and foremost, I'm a music lover. Anyone who knows me, anyone who knows anything about me, knows that on top of books, I have garnered a music library that is unparalleled. And so this was an easy way for me to move this conversation into our Dusty Film conversations. So when we talk about movies, we're going to be doing it from the standpoint of lists of things on our film journey that may have been left out, but certainly not out of the culture, not out of the attention of people who really love good music. And all of a sudden, here comes this amazing soundtrack to support a great movie. Sometimes these movies are B movies, but the soundtracks through the roof. So we're looking at that social backdrop as well. Um, when the movie was released, the vibes that they were picking up on, especially the musicians, how that translated into a cohesion of both visual and audio experiences. I think it's just going to be a fun journey. So we're going to press play. We're going to get started because we've got a list of 11, I think. I have 11 movies I want to talk about. Let's start with the first selection we have here. I've got my list perfectly curated, and what I want to talk about with respect to giving out flowers for soundtracks that have still become a part of my music listening journey. They're just timeless to me. We're going to start the list, and they're not in any particular order. We're starting with Above the Rim from 1994. This soundtrack, just to give you a few stats, on the Billboard, it made it to number two in the Hot 100s. It was the number one in rap and number seven in R&B. That's how powerful this soundtrack was. Yet it was not nominated for an Oscar as a soundtrack, which fascinates me still to this day. I don't know what benchmarks were set to get these things out there. At the time of its release, it was done on cassette and CD. So this was past the vinyl era because I'd had a collection of albums as well. I go back to 45s, had a collection of those. But this was a CD release. This was a cassette release. So I remember exactly what the cassette fold out looked like when you pulled out the cassette, then you pulled out the jacket cover, and it would fold out, and it had these little tiny words about all of the things you wanted to know because nobody was using the internet like that back then. We didn't look stuff up. If it didn't come in the jacket or in the sleeve or in the pullout where we could read it, we didn't know anything about the music. Word of mouth. Maybe MTV. I'll give credit to MTV for the shine. It gave to a lot of music credit and a lot of music information that we would have missed because we weren't doing our own research back then. This particular album also features 18 songs, and six of them are absolutely standout. Absolutely standout. And they include anything by SWV. Remember, that got remixed by Michael Jackson. That's what a banger that jam was. Then you have H Town's Part Time Lover. Go down a little further, you got Doggy Style by DJ Rogers. That was a vibe. I remember that. That was one of those, just let that roll, let that ride, good ride music. But Regulate by Warren G and Nate Dogg, to this day, is still one of those songs that every person who loves R&B, hip hop, that genre, that fusion from the 90s, sing every word, know every word of this song. If you are a Nate Dogg fan, you know everything you need to know about Regulate, including where that first line delivered by Warren G comes from. I don't know that a lot of people know that, so I'm going to share what may be a tidbit. Who knows? It may not be. Have you ever heard of the movie Young Guns, starring Emilio Estevez, Lou Diamond Phillips, Kiefer Sutherland? Those are the names that I remember from the cast. But this was a Western style movie about a bunch of young men, basically top shelf actors, um, in one movie. One of those rare things like Ocean's 11, get the best of best together and make a film. Doesn't really have a lot of weight to it. Doesn't really resonate as a strong movie. Wildly entertaining. People show up anyway, that kind of thing. And so that first line in Regulate is delivered by Emilio Estevez, if I'm not mistaken. Don't quote me, but if I remember my movie lore, that's who delivered it. Got to earn your keep. Learn how to use your steel. I believe that was Emilio. Now, further down this list is Tupac and Thug Life with Pour Out a Little Liquor. One of my personal favorites. I've never poured out a little liquor or a lot of liquor, but I get it. Heard about it. It's a guy thing, apparently. I'm not doing it. Pour a little wine. I've spilled it. How about that? But going further down the list, The Lady of Rage has a single on here. And featuring her to me was a standout. It was one of those things where her career was really trying to emerge into the scene, get more women into the rap game. And I really liked her vibe. I liked her sound. I wish when she showed up on the Steve Harvey show, they would have put a little more shine and energy into her skill set and brought a little of that R&B hip hop energy into the show. But it was more about a jazz musician as a teacher, so I get it. But I think it's a missed opportunity because you can't go back into the 90s and put shine and make these moments something that people can actually look to and get clips of that really show some of their skill set. Um, I saw a clip of Queens, side note, saw a clip of Queens, and I see Eve rap battling Brandy, clips that resonate with all of your skill sets. They should live there. These things should happen. So I shout out to her being on the soundtrack, Lady of Rage. If you've never heard of her, check her out. It's a whole vibe. And then there is Cracker. Let me add 'em. Just to name a few of these songs that were just wrote, played over and over again on R&B radio. 90s radio was huge. And so that's where we start our list. But as you can see, even when you have such a powerful soundtrack setup, it sometimes takes the movie to another height. And I think the Above the Rim soundtrack did that. I think as great as the movie was, and I when I say great, we know it wasn't a top shelf film, but in its own right, the talent that they had at their disposal, I think they did a really good job with it. Um, I think it was a really good intro into moving away from how movies depicted thug life so intensely and showed another aspect. And I think that led to Love and Basketball, in my humble opinion. But we're going to move on to the next one because we got a lot of stuff to cover. Before we go any further, I do want to take a moment to say please subscribe to the channel. Um, Here on Tall Tales and Short Stories and Dusty Film Cans, this is more of self-expression that I offer than it is on my other two channels, which are book reviews, books I love and books I love to talk about. Here you're getting examples and instances and moments of things that have resonated throughout my life and how they've impacted me. So taking this journey, this music journey, is significant in that it is such a huge part of my everyday life. It always has been. Being introduced to music at a young age from a family of music lovers, this journey started with Motown and has never stopped. And it's led to our next soundtrack. And it's also going to be me in my bag a little bit. Cut me some grace because, first and foremost, I'm not here to yuck your yum. You may find justifications for why things are the way that they are. I'm only sharing with you how these things hit me and why I feel the way that I do. We're going to talk about Love Jones, 1997, a significant movie that came along that talked about relationships in a way that resonated with me then and now. It's one of the few honest conversations, peer to peer, friend to friend, heart to heart, that you rarely got exposed to in Black film, along with the shade and the drama that goes along with relationships when you're young and you're trying to find who your person is. This album went platinum. It is an amazing soundtrack. It was top 20 on Billboard 200. It was number three on the R&B and hip hop list. I guess R&B slash hip hop as a whole vibe on Billboard. And then the 1998 nominations came out for Best Score, Best Soundtrack. And those soundtracks were Titanic, Amistad, Good Will Hunting, Kundun, and LA Confidential. And these are the songs that are on the soundtrack for Love Jones. As I go through this list, and I'm not going to go through all of them, but I'm going to go through the ones that I think are going to hit the hardest and don't make sense to me why this was not recognized, but for the powerhouse soundtrack that it was. First and foremost, you have Brother to the Night, which is an all bass, I guess you would call a poetry slam vibe beat that was put out that set the tone for how this whole film was going to go. Did an excellent job keeping the pace of that vibe. Then there's Hopeless by Deion Ferris. That song to this day just hits different. It is emotional, it is weighted, it's melodic, and it's beautiful. Hats off, big bouquet of flowers to Deion, big bouquet. I love that song. I honestly can tell you that's why I bought the soundtrack for that. And then I discovered that the Fugees were on there with Lauryn Hill singing The Sweetest Thing. Such a beautiful song. And that scratch at the beginning of how it even starts out is so awesome. Then you move into Maxwell something, something, or something, something. I say something, something. That's what I'm accustomed to saying. I mean, come on. That's in the first four on this list. Then you get Groove Theory, Never Enough. If you don't recall these jams, if we're on YouTube as we have this conversation, when we are done with this list, go check out some of these soundtracks. Some of you that enjoyed this may have never heard of this. So I really hope I'm introducing you to something that is going to hit in your library the way it hit in mine. You have on this Escape in the Rain. You have a song called Rush Over with Michelle and D'Angelo. Y'all don't hear me when I tell you this is a whole vibe. And seeing this not recognized for what it was, what it did to black art and black entertainment in the film genre, and how the marriage of the soundtrack can elevate a film was done beautifully here. There are a lot more songs, great artists, but one in particular is why it made this list. They went back and pulled Duke Ellington and John Coltrane's In a Sentimental Mood. The timing of it is placed beautifully into the movie, but it introduced this song to so many people who may not have known about it, who may not have been aware that these wonderful things existed. Hopefully, I'm doing that for you. So that's why this particular soundtrack, to me, deserved far more accolades than what it got. So I'm glad you're here, and I hope these flowers let everyone who had anything to do with the creation of this film know we appreciate you. All right, we're here and we're ready for the next soundtrack. I had to take a break and get some stuff done. This is such a huge undertaking, and I gave it a lot of thought, so I just wanted to make sure I was on point when I brought it to my page. So, the next soundtrack we're going to talk about is less about the soundtrack and more about who produced it. Now, when Waiting to Exhale came out in 1995, it came out more in CD form and cassette. This wasn't the vinyl era. And the sales were at 7 times platinum. That means 7 million plus. I want you to keep all this in mind because, again, we're here to talk about what I think are soundtracks that should be exalted in the world of film and music as a combination. How a soundtrack furthers how you look at a film, how you experience a film, things like that. This in particular, if you remember anything about Waiting to Exhale, and most women remember more than one thing about Waiting to Exhale, you know that the song Shoot Shoot was such a huge hit for both Whitney Houston and for the movie that it was transitional in helping you if you were on the fence but you were a Whitney fan and maybe you weren't rocking with the other stuff she did, this could push you over. Maybe transitional is not the right word. It's pivotal. I think that's a better word, pivotal, not transitional. Now, I want to talk about who produced the soundtrack. Babyface produced the entire soundtrack, and the soundtrack doubled as sort of a way to break up the playlist. I'm sorry, I'm trying to get my cursor to work, and it's not doing the heavy lifting it should be doing because my notes are paramount here. But anyway, so it was doubling as sort of the group therapy of soundtracks that backed up something. Babyface was like, hold my wine. I got a soundtrack that is going to set this film on fire. And he did. He did. But that's not the only soundtrack that Babyface produced. He also did the Boomerang soundtrack in 1992. He also did the Bodyguard soundtrack in 1992. He also did the Bad Boys soundtrack in 1995. He also did Save the Last Dance from the motion picture in 2000. That was Babyface that did this soundtrack. And let me share this little fact with you. Babyface did not receive any Oscar nominations at all. But his name in Best Original Song and Best Original Score doesn't even appear. And he worked on When You Believe in the Prince of Egypt. He doesn't even get the courtesy of being listed as part of the team when they did receive the Best Original Song soundtrack. They left Babyface off. I'm just going to highlight a few songs that exist on the soundtrack that I think are of note, that help further the point that I'm making in creating something like this, because flowers to his production, to the artists he chose to bring these to life. That includes Mary J. Blige, TLC, Brandy, Aretha Franklin, Toni Braxton, SWV, Shantae Moore, Patti LaBelle, and of course, Whitney Houston. I don't know how you get there. I just don't know how you get there and feel comfortable that when you nominate a album as a soundtrack to support a major film, I don't know how it makes sense when people digest that this was left off. So I wanted to bring it to our platform so we could give it the attention it deserves Go back and listen to some of those songs, especially if there is no other Mary J. Blige song. The one "I'm Not Gonna Cry" is probably the most outstanding female empowerment song that exists because, man, that character Angela Bassett was on one, and we were with her. We were feeling it. So shout out to that particular soundtrack. Our next soundtrack is short and sweet in terms of what I have to say about it. In all honesty, I'm not familiar with the film, but I am crazy familiar with the soundtrack. This came out in vinyl. It was released in 1972, and it's from a movie called The Harder They Come, which I believe is also the name of the soundtrack. It sold over 500,000 in the United States because this is not an American release. Um, it peaked on Billboard in the reggae catalog. It is a reggae album, and what this album did was it sort of introduced reggae as an enjoyable form of entertainment. You didn't see reggae as an extension of a way people communicated. It really sort of gave reggae that breadth of entertainment outside of its footprint in culture, its identity around one artist. There were so many people who knew of one or two artists in the reggae scene, but they didn't really have a appreciation of what reggae had to offer. This is, and I get again why this didn't make it into the American viewpoint of a celebrated soundtrack. But I promise you, if you go back and you pick up this soundtrack, my personal favorite is Rivers of Babylon. Excellent, excellent song. I think you'll enjoy it too. So I put it here because I wanted to share with you that I think this is something that if it missed your purview and you didn't get a chance to see it, go check it out because it's well worth it, the entire soundtrack. Now it's on to 1998. The movie is Belly. Now, Belly didn't hit the way Belly didn't hit with me the way it did with the community. It was crazy popular. Everybody saw it. Everybody loved it. Wasn't my vibe. But the soundtrack, though. Oh, that soundtrack, though. It was released in the CD form because, again, by '98, the vinyl era had long since gone. It went gold. It did not go platinum. I get it. Hip hop at that time was really sort of transitioning, and Hype Williams used visual excess in an expert way to create this spirituality meets soul kind of vibe. So let's go through some of the highlights, more so of who's on here, as opposed to the song itself. Because at the time, you had to be a true hip hop head to appreciate what you were getting in a album like this. If you weren't into hip hop, you missed out that in one soundtrack you had D'Angelo, DMX, Method Man, Nas, Ja Rule, Maya, Jay Z, Nar, Maze, uh, WC, and Rakim. Come on, come on. I mean, if you look at this who's who and the body of work that they were putting down at that time, you had Sean Paul in this, you had the Wu Tang Clan, you had Half a Mill, you had Locks. And even though now these names may make perfect sense to a lot of people who are really starting to pick up the storytelling that is the best way to live in this space, in hip hop, in my opinion. This album, to those of us who were already here, was absolute gold. It was a gem. Cars everywhere, radios everywhere were rocking at least half of this album when it got released. I never understood why we still call them albums. And nobody's like buying albums anymore, but whatever. But there are some things that I did want to share with you about Belly and about the soundtrack because it captured the pulse of the culture. I think that's why it resonated with me because I was so into hip hop. It was such a great addition to my collection. Made me feel like I was, you know, into some things. And it had all the names that I mentioned. These were the names that were hot in the hip hop world, in the culture of enjoying music, but they were predominantly East Coast artists. I'm a West Coast baby. So low key, and this is the truth. When you rocked a lot of East Coast hip hop or rap at the time, it wasn't something you just went around and shared with. And then this album came along and it was so mainstream. Everybody was talking about East Coast hip hop in terms of just casually speaking on it. It wasn't just West Coast that dominated the conversation in the community where I grew up. And I really appreciated that. The original tracks and the heavyweight names, at the time to us, that's exactly what they were. So we were really celebrating even seeing something like this. And we, if you look at the movie Belly and its soundtrack, the soundtrack is a character in this film because each of these hot jams sort of furthers the narrative of what this movie is about. Um, was it a great movie? That depends on who you are. Again, don't yuck your yum. You may love Belly down to the very last second before the credits roll. I don't really remember a lot of that movie, but I know I saw it. I want to say I've seen it twice. Don't remember a lot of that movie. But I remember what it was like when that soundtrack hit. And that's why it's here on this list. I want to give flowers to every single doorway that this album opened up so that more and more hip hop was getting breath, was getting exposed, was making its way to people that really understood as a form of entertainment. Not all rap, not all hip hop was gangster rap music. Certainly, that was a genre you could inhabit, just as metal is to rock, and just as, there are other ways of enjoying everything. Um, but I hope that if you're not aware of this soundtrack, you go back and get it because, man, you will be so happy you did. I think this is a good place to sort of wrap up this introduction. There are a couple of great things I want to bring to Dusty Film Cans, and I wanted to test out doing this, giving flowers to soundtracks of films that I think should definitely be celebrated and hopefully enjoyed. Please subscribe. I would love to have you come back and enjoy more of these. I've got some great stuff coming for Dusty Film Cans, and I'm working on my next short story. So I look forward to seeing you here again. I always enjoy having you, and thank you for enjoying everything that we've got going on here. Also, don't forget, I do book reviews uh, and Goddess Garden Book Chat on YouTube. I also do the mature reads for over 18 on Private Garden, which is also 11 Goddess. I'm 11 Goddess. So I'll see you with all this great stuff I've got coming. I look forward to seeing you back here soon.